good. All right, let's shift gears. We're going to start basically another lesson here. But I think I'm excited about our discussion today because I think it's been super fruitful in my heart as I have wrestled with this text. And I think I'm excited for our discussions around it too. So we're going to be tackling that next section that it's labeled verse 13 through 17. What does your header say above that? Whoever's got their Bible over verse 13 there. Boasting about tomorrow. Anyone have anything other than that?
I've got no heading, but I've got a folded 13. So
it's a new thought. Okay. Yeah. Any other? Same. Okay. No gap. No gap. Just jumping right into it. Well, I love how one commentator labels this section arrogant self-sufficiency, is what he says. Okay, so clearly this is a shift in what James is wanting to communicate here. I believe the discussion that we're about to have is so relevant for all of us here. Okay, this topic is probably something that we in the 21st century church in America should probably look at once a week. I mean, this idea of autonomy, living in autonomy, governing our own self, this tendency to self-govern. This is what I think James is going to hit on today, our autonomy. Everyone know when I'm saying autonomy, what I mean by that? Like we live without living under the influence of another power. So we just self-govern our own life. I think he's encouraging us to look at this. So I'm going to say he's going to challenge us in three ways. Three ways that he's going to challenge our autonomy. The first thing is he's going to call out our self-sufficient plans. And then he's going to call out our self-serving goals. And then I think he's going to urge us towards a God-focused perspective. Okay, so he's going to call out self-sufficient plans, self-serving goals, and then push us towards a God-centered perspective. Okay, and so this is how we're going to make our way through that. Let's start with James addressing our self-sufficient plans here in this first part. Look at what he says there. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there. Okay, so just pause there. He says, for those of you who tend to say, I'm going to do this. For those of you who tend to say, here's my plan, here's my 10-year plan, here's how this is going to work out. He says, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how your posture towards your future. He says, for those of you who tend to make self-sufficient plans, let's discuss this. Okay, I think James is first going to challenge us in the way that we view and plan for our future. Okay? And hear this. James is not saying that planning or forecasting for the future is bad. He's not saying that. The problem is when we plan in such a way that God has no place in our plans. Okay? It's where we let financial payoffs, where we let security, where we let marketing trends, corporate opportunities shape our future planning more than our faith in the Lord and trust in His Word. Okay? This is self-sufficiency that James has in mind here. Okay, we're going to take a minor rabbit trail here, but I think it's good. I think it's going to be helpful because I think that there can be a divide in Christian circles around this idea of planning. Okay, on one hand, there is the value of stewardship, the value of wise planning, which are very godly habits. You think about Nehemiah. He counted the cost before building the wall. He wanted to make sure he had what he needed before doing that. Even Jesus would say it'd be foolish for a builder to start construction before knowing if he had the cost to finish it. Like there is wisdom in stewardship. It's clear that planning and considering our resources in decision making is an application of godly wisdom. Now, if we can identify, though, maybe a blind spot in this camp, they might be more apt to categorize radical faith as carelessness. Like, what are you doing? Like, you don't even think about what you're doing. You're saying you're trusting the Lord. You're acting foolishly and calling it faith, right? So, just a blind spot in someone who might sit in this camp. Okay? Now, on the other side, I would say, where are we at? There's the value of living in radical faith and radical trust in the Lord. Scripture is full of examples of God leading His people to live in faith. Okay, think about Abraham, follow me into the unknown, or Israelites, follow me into the wilderness. Peter, step out and follow me out of the boat into the water. We really could go on and on. Like this idea of radical faith is also an instruction from the Lord, an invitation from the Lord. And so, just as an application of godly wisdom is stewardship, so is walking in radical faith. To follow Jesus, to be Christian, is to walk and to exercise faith. Now, a blind spot for people here people here may be quick to categorize stewardship as just convenient stinginess. You know, like they may say you're being selfish and calling it stewardship. Okay, so I want to point out, and I'm using this hyperbolic language just to expose where these two camps along this spectrum in ways that we might view the other side. Does this make sense? Okay, so you have wise stewardship and you have radical faith. These are meant to coexist in us, but sometimes I'd say we lean one way or the other. And so let's discuss it. And so I'm going to give us 5 minutes because I don't want us to go too long, but I just want to hear your thoughts. When you think about this idea, the relationship between wise stewardship and radical faith, what comes to your mind? And hear this, and I mean this. We need each other in this because we're going to be all over the place, and that's a good thing. Like we're going to be all along the spectrum. That's part of unity. We need one another to challenge us well. So we'll start the conversation with that. We welcome our opinions in this. Okay, so what you got? Who wants to kick it off? Yeah, Ryan.
I think of the Jorgensens.
Okay.
Mission people who they take the time to plan.
Sure.
Got the resources.
Yep.
They didn't just hop on a plane and go.
Yep.
But to go and start a new life.
Yep.
Is in itself a big leap of radical faith.
That's right.
I think that's the perfect example of stewardship plus radical faith.
That's right. Which is what we were talking about. Those are meant to be balanced. So yeah, great example. Yeah.
If I can play devil's advocate to that, Ryan, I think that's a great example. However, I don't feel like it's applicable to me. How do I balance this in my 9-to-5 job as a financial analyst, where my job is stewardship? How do I incorporate radical faith into my job, or like as a nurse? Like, how do we do it here without leaving?
Wait, are you saying in your specific job or are you saying in your life?
Daily Christian American.
Okay.
Both and.
Okay.
I think there is an application in my specific job. But
Sure.
I was also just talking like in my daily life, how do I
Yep.
balance stewardship and radical faith without leaving?
Sure. That's a great question or great thought. What you got, Barbara?
I think in general, we all have different incomes, we all have different expenses, so to speak. And so God gives us what we need in our space, and we're to use it wisely. And with that said, I mean, I have dealt with many times, but with that said, God might ask me, there have been times He said, bring this mom and child into your home.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to live.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, another 2 mouths to feed, another 2 showers to have, water, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, expense added to the home.
Mm.
And so something like that, you don't like the Jorgens to sit down and calculate.
Mm.
Can I afford the extra this? Can I afford now this? God has brought these people
Mm.
in need to the home. I've provided what you need in this circle, and even honestly, when we haven't managed it well, He still manages it
Sure.
well to accommodate what He's asked us to do.
That's good.
So not everything can be planned out.
That's insightful. Thanks for that.
I would add to that. I feel like there's been a lot of decisions in our life that God has brought that don't make sense. And people have looked at us and said, like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't make this happen. But the Lord has provided. And I'm thankful for those times because it may not have been, we may not have had the money or the resources, or it may not have been wise stewardship in that moment, but the Lord has provided, which has then led us in the future to, try to steward wisely, but listen to the Lord and be generous with what we have.
Mm.
And I feel like, in a way, as we are, like Barbara said, as we're trying to manage what we have and use that wisely, while also being generous, the Lord has just taken care of.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, our goal was not necessarily to have a ton of extra, but to manage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense.
You never had a time.
Do what?
You never had time.
Yeah,
Mm.
and so, but it has made us.
Well, I have a ton of extra children.
It has really grown our trust in the Lord.
Yeah.
Which then fuels you to be generous, because you're like, I trust the Lord. Like, He's gonna give us what we
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
silly, well, kind of. It's a practical example of how like these things have played out over the years. There was a point where I didn't have and I wanted what I didn't have, and so I just went and got it.
Mm.
And I thought I needed it. I'm like, I need a carpet in here, and so I bought a carpet like that I could not afford. And I put it on a credit card, and my faith was like, okay, I need this carpet. You're just gonna have to cover me. Like, how is this money gonna be paid off or whatever? Okay, that's one example
Yeah.
of where I was not stewarding the little money I had,
Mm-hmm.
but I was trusting Him to cover me in my mistake.
Yeah.
So like that's a bad.
Sure.
That doesn't sit well, right?
Yeah.
But He did give me grace.
Yeah.
But then 3 years later, I need a carpet again, and I'm not going to repeat the same mistake.
Hmm.
And He provided me a carpet for free. That was like that, and but I had to work it out, and like I stewarded what I had better, and He provided more.
Sure.
And it was just like, and now and it's cleaner,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's just this cleaner experience when they're both together.
Yeah.
And we have grace in the meantime, like He's saying, to figure it out, because He covers us even in our, like, He remembers that we're dust. He knows our frailty.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And I think we're supposed to, He gives our gifts differently. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can cause envy. I'm like, why did she get $10 and I got $1? Like, what's wrong with me that I only got $1? But stewardship is, what are you doing with your $1?
Sure.
And how are you turning a profit on what He's given you, even if it's a trouble He's given you?
Mm-hmm.
And that is Christian stewardship, and it takes faith to do that.
Yeah.
You have to have radical faith to steward what you have. If you're a millionaire, you have to have radical faith to part with that money.
Yep.
Right? Like, that takes radical faith no matter how much you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you give the money to homeless people?
So let me get Ben. He's been wanting to. Yep. And then we're going to have to move on. I'll let you go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, I think that sometimes God puts us in the camp of having to do both things at different times based on how He needs to develop our faith.
Sure.
So sometimes there's a person where like staying put is the greater leap of faith.
Sure.
You know, they're inclined, they want to go, they're ready to go.
Yep.
God's like, no, trust in me,
Mm-hmm.
stay put. Be faithful, stay put.
That's
And
wise.
then there's other times where He's like, okay, you're getting too comfortable.
Yeah.
You need to take a step of faith to know me well.
Yep.
So trust me, it's time to go.
That's a great distinction. Thanks for adding that. Kayla, you want to put a closure on it?
Sure. I was just gonna say, Matt, to your question, I think one thing that we've kind of, I don't know if this answers your question or not, but I think prayer in all things helps, like you were saying, how does it apply to my life, right? So like the Lord, like all the decisions you're going through in your day, praying through those, your faith, like God may not call you to go to Spain, but He may call you to give generously to this person or to give your time or I don't know what it is for your own life. But I think that could be.
We could probably talk about this for an hour, and probably need to, but we're not.
You're so
I know we're not going to be able to though. However, one huge question we have to ask is, what do we consider wise stewardship? We're not going to get into that necessarily, but we have to understand God has given us resources to be used for His glory. So if God says, I'm going to intrude on your plans, intrude on your resources, and have an opportunity before you, then that is, like, stewardship is using our things faithfully. It's not, stewardship shouldn't always be seen as saving or, prepping. Stewardship is using for God's glory. So, like I said, we could discuss that a ton. We're not going to be able to. But ultimately, the goal is that we would operate with both of these qualities in our life. That we would operate with radical faith. We would trust the Lord with radical, life-changing faith, but also steward our resources that God has given us with radical, countercultural wisdom. Okay, so these things have to be held together. And so, now, in this text, though, James is specifically calling out and specifically challenging self-sufficient planning. So that's what he has in mind specifically, is self-sufficient planning. Challenging where we may have perfect plans, but have they been brought before the Lord? That is what he is trying to challenge here. Ultimately asking the questions, do your plans show evidence of trusting the Lord in faith, or do your plans show the same wisdom that would be exercised by our neighbors and coworkers? There should be something distinct and different about followers of Jesus. And we're going to hold on to this because James is going to hit this at the end. Anybody want to comment before we move on? Yeah.
What's a comment?
Comments like, you want to say something about it? About what I said. We'll talk later. Okay, so as it relates to autonomy, James is also not only going to challenge your plans, so like how you arrive to something, like what wisdom you enact to get there, but also he's going to challenge our goals, what we're trying to accomplish. Look at what he says. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there, and then what? Trade and make a profit. That's our intent. What is the planning leading to? They're planning to go and make some money. Here, James reveals the aim of their planning. The aim of what are they aiming for in the future? The purpose of their stewardship was profit. It's personal gain. Now, these 2 points are easily connected because we could see how self-sufficient plans would lead to self-serving goals. Right? If we are making plans, if I am leaving the Lord out of my planning, then it would be obvious that the trajectory of my planning would lead to my goal. Right? If I'm leaving the Lord out of my planning, it would make sense that the end would accomplish my self-serving goals. And so this, I think, hit me hard as I was thinking about Kayla and I feel like I used to be a lot more prone to exercise faith and asking of the Lord in every circumstance. Like, I felt like it was just, we had a decision we needed to make. Let's pray and ask the Lord what He would want us to do. But as we've gotten older and as the stakes have gotten higher, there's kids now and there's less money to be distributed out. I tend to become more closed-handed and begin to exercise just like, well, what do I think is wise about this decision, rather than what might the Lord want me to do in faith. And so I'm just sharing that that's where I think this hit me, because James wants to expose our end goal. As we consider our future, how much of it is shaped by our own profit? How much of it is shaped by our wealth rather than our generosity? How much of it is shaped by our security rather than mission? How much is shaped by our dreams rather than following the Lord in faith? He's wanting to expose that in us. And I don't want to get in too much in the weeds on this, but I just want us to expose, I think, a deficiency in our heart to make self-sufficient plans that often will lead to self-serving goals. Okay, I think we could all say that we can get there at one point or another. He is trying to challenge our self-serving, autonomous planning. And I think here, though, he's going to shift us to a God-centered perspective, okay? And all I'm going to say to us here is to invite you in the way that James invites himself in. He says, come now, those who make these types of plans. Come now if you have a tendency to make plans in this way. And let's reason together. Let's talk about this. Because what James does next is he is now going to, I think, use logic to show, hey, you make plans in this way, but really that's not wise for you. Watch how he does this. He is going to help us see our limitations by giving us a God-focused perspective. Okay, look at what he does. I think this is let's see. He says, you make self-sufficient plans with self-serving goals. He says, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. So he says, you make these goals, yet you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Okay, so first, it's like he's trying to expose the limitations in their perspective and showing you make these types of plans, you don't even know what tomorrow looks like. You don't even know what the next day looks like. Your life is painfully fragile. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. You are one phone call. You are one doctor's appointment. You are one accident from your life changing forever. One phone call. He says, your life is fragile. Don't make these types of plans in this way without the Lord, knowing how fragile your life is and how limited your perspective is. You don't know what tomorrow brings. And so I would say it appears that he is using a logical argument to convince his audience of their arrogant self-sufficiency. He's saying, what makes you think you can make perfect plans on your own? You don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. Okay, so as I mentioned, he's not saying not to plan. No, he is challenging a self-focused approach to planning, a self-focused approach towards the future, a plan that is influenced only by our own strategizing, only by our own experience, only by our own benefit in the end, a strategy ultimately that looks no different than our neighbors. You hear that? So a strategy, you think our perspective of the future looks no different than our neighbors and coworkers who don't know Christ. It looks the exact same. And he's trying to challenge us in that. And he says, I would say, look at James's encouragement. Here is the remedy. He says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills. So it's like he exposes the problem, then he says, look, this is what you say instead. If the Lord wills. Now, hear this. This is much more than James is saying, just add that to the end of your statement. It's much more than just like, hey, we're going to live here for 7 years, we're going to grow our career, we're going to sell our house with the market when the market is hot, if the Lord wills. Like that's still our plan, and then just saying, if the Lord wills. So it's not just tagging it on to the end of our plans. Instead, he's advocating for a view of our life that truly understands that all that we are and all that is our future is held in God's hands. And that we would start, when planning for the future, we would start with, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? We don't end it, we don't make our plans and then end it with, Lord, if this is your will, but we start with the question of, Lord, what does it look like to trust you in faith with this specific situation? And start there. I think he's challenging us, because I would say, maybe often, some of us may sit here and say, I haven't done that in a while. Like I haven't started with, Lord, what do you want from me in a while? I may end there, but I don't start there. I think that's what James is trying to expose in us. And really, if we have this if the Lord wills approach, it changes our perspective. Like if we get a promotion at work, or if we get recognition, it's not immediately adding to our accolades, but instead it's first, when we understand if the Lord wills what he wills, then we see that this is the Lord's provision. Or we come into like a beneficial financial situation and we say, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? So or even if we're hit by a tragedy, when we understand if the Lord wills, then that allows us in that tragedy to say, Lord, you hold my life in your hands. If the Lord wills, I trust you in that. So it shapes our perspective. And I would just say, people, we are We are followers of Jesus. Jesus, a countercultural man. A man who lived a life that was upside down to the rest of the world. Don't you think our way of life should have a hard time fitting into the cultural mold? If we follow Jesus, don't you think our life should have a hard time fitting into what the culture does? I think that's just a challenge we have to think through. And so, all I'm going to say about this, we don't have time to discuss it. I want to be respectful of our kids. But I want you to write down or think and consider what is one decision or area of life that you need to take a if the Lord wills approach. You know, what is, if you could just identify one, what is one thing that I haven't even went to the Lord with? You don't have to discuss it. You don't have to say anything about it. I just want us to maybe write it down. And I want to say, remember, this is not, here are my plans, Lord, if you will it. This is setting all things aside and saying, Lord, this is my life. What do you want to do with it? Okay, is there anything that someone's got a burning thought they want to say before we move on? Because we're going to wrap it up here in just a second.
Is also a Jewish phrase.
Which one?
Like Lord willing.
What's it called? What's
Inshallah.
Inshallah? All right. Inshallah. That's helpful. What's it?
I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, and forgive me if I'm not,
Okay.
but just wanting to encourage everybody to, like, if one of these particular points really hits you, and you want to discuss it, let's discuss it while we're eating.
That's right.
And while we're going throughout the week, or text one another, or just at the meal time. It's a wonderful community type time. And we don't have to only use these few minutes in between each.
Yeah.
Let's discuss anything.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Rachel. That is helpful. Good insight. So yeah, I'm not upset with you saying that or whatever you
I
said.
know you were going to say.
No, that's great. That's a great point. Yeah.
Just real quick, I've been simmering on kind of what Matt brought up, and like back to point number 2, like wise stewardship and radical faith in like our personal life versus professional life. So I think that for me, like in dealing with my own family or my work, I tend to be more on the wise stewardship end. And like at work, I'm gonna like look at the risk benefits, make the right decision based on the
Sure.
literature and all the whole picture. Matt's gonna look at the spreadsheet and make the right financial decision. Or even if with our in the inner circle of our family, but where I want to step out and be radical is like in our giving and in our service.
Sure.
And sometimes it's hard for me to do those things without knowing what the end result will be. And I think that's where the radical nature comes. Like I want to give and be like, I know that these many people will be saved and this will be planned to do this and that, but I feel like that's not for us to know at that stage. It has to be radical.
Yeah. That's right. Anybody else? Did someone else have a thought? I thought I heard someone about to chime in. Yeah, so I think we see how these are connected, especially when you think, or we see how what James is trying to lead us towards does challenge this wise stewardship and radical faith idea for the future. Like, how do we plan? How do we think about what God has given us, and how do we think about how we should respond to those things? And so I think we could talk about this for a long time. We won't right here, but I do want to close with what I believe is James kind of putting a cap on it at the end. Look at how he closes this. Verse 17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Now, some commentators would say this is applicable in general to sin. Like, well, for you, if you know it's wrong and you do it, then that's sin. Which I'm not saying is a terrible way to interpret it, but most commentators would say that's not what he's going for. He is talking about a specific application to this section. So he's like, hey, you just heard all this, and so go and apply it. Like, now that you know the right thing to do, like you know to live with a God-centered approach, go and do it. Go and live this way. Go and apply it. Okay? So I just love how he ends it with like, so now go and do it. Don't live in sin. Go and do it. And so I want to close here with this. We need to recognize our self-sufficient plans. Like recognize where we might be making our plans on our own volition only, without the influence of the Lord. Acknowledge that your plans, where they primarily lead to your profit, to your gain. Where is that? What's going on there? And then finally, humble yourself and begin to ask first, before anything else, ask first, Lord, what do you desire to do with this? What do you desire to do with my life? This is radical faith and wise stewardship. Okay. Any thoughts? We can discuss them over lunch. All right. I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to read our liturgy. Lord, I thank you for your word, and even in the ways that it challenges us. Maybe specifically in the ways that it challenges us. Because I feel that these are the ways that you desire to show us an aspect of your character that maybe we're not seeing clearly. And so I pray that here, right now, as we sit here and maybe even wrestle with some conviction, that you would invite us or encourage us to be willing to feel that conviction, willing to respond to that conviction, willing to take steps in our life that would recognize when your word speaks to us, then we must respond. And so, Lord, I ask you to give us the wisdom to live out our faith. Give us the wisdom to consider our future and to really offer our life into your hands. There's so much to unpack here that we could probably go on, that I just pray that you would fill the gaps, Spirit, that you would impress on our hearts, impress on our minds the things that we specifically need to hear around this topic. And I pray, Lord, that you would do it I believe that you can. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.